Your NPCs are born in the dark. They're without any details. You cannot make them real in an instant. You build them in passes, layer by layer. First, you add the spotlight that shows them to the players, and then you complement their surroundings with a fill that puts them into context. Next, your edge light will bring out their features by highlighting them, and then you cap it off with practical lights that highlight parts of their backstory. In those 5 steps, you'll layer details with words, and the image becomes higher and higher quality in your players' minds. Practicals, edge, fill, spotlight, and dark. Let me show you how. Welcome to Mystic Arts, where I'll use any analogy I can think of, especially if it reminds people that my name is Daði, and I'm a professional writer and director, and I've been DMing for over 10 years. In drawing, rendering refers to the process of taking a sketch with flat colors and slowly adding shading and highlights as the picture becomes more and more detailed. That same principle can be applied to role-playing games, like when you sketch out scenes or locations and then render in details. But also for literally any part of the game, like NPCs, because sometimes the only thing that separates a mediocre NPC and a brilliant NPC is just that little bit of rendering that makes them seem more three-dimensional. And we can illustrate our example here fairly easily by talking about lighting. You'll have to excuse the filmmaking analogies, but it's important to me that you all remember I went to film school. Lighting a subject for film or broadcasting, like I guess what we're doing now, is about artistic flair. Sure, but there are certain basics you should follow if your intention is for the audience to understand what they're looking at. Let's illustrate this example by lighting a scene. This scene right here. We've got 4 kinds of lights in the room right now, and I think they'll perfectly illustrate how lighting creates depth and how it helps you see characters in a new light. Get it? Anyway, let's turn all of this off. In an RPG, the players rely on the DM to be the light that illuminates what they see. The DM is like a flashlight in an unlit room. You, the DM, are always the player's window into the game. The players are relying on you to know what the hell is going on. Out of all the things that DM does, telling them what players see, hear, and know has got to be at the top. So the moment you mention the existence of an NPC, there's a guy in this room, you've pointed a flashlight into a specific direction. But what happens next? It's a flurry of clarifying questions that will probably be bizarre to you. Is he a human? Is he going to kill us? Can I see if they have tattoos? That's probably because your players are confused. A common mistake DMs make is to provide no light. They take the flashlight and they switch it off and expect the players to fill in the details themselves. But lighting is about focus, about directing the eye where to look. While imperfect, the flashlight can be useful. And if you don't provide it, switch the flashlight off, the players are sitting there in total darkness as you say nothing, do nothing, describe nothing, and then things get worse from there, because in the dark, with nothing to direct the eye, the players will have to raise the exposure, and their vision of the world gets grainy, messy, and ugly. If you had players grasping at straws, asking confusing questions, and generally stumbling around, not believing in the world, it's because you haven't lit it, and they've turned up the exposure to compensate, and where everything is a grainy mess. I've done this, and my players told me afterwards that sessions felt like a fever dream, where nothing was certain, nothing was uncertain. So you want to avoid the darkness. You add a spotlight. A spotlight is always a good place to start. It's how movie shots are lit. They start with a key light, a light that's key to illuminating the subject and setting the mood. For an NPC, this is their role in the story. Once you know an NPC's role, you can cast them in the right light. But guard or queen or dragon isn't a compelling role on its own, because those things don't have contrast. Notice how sharp the spotlight is. It's got me all lit, but the back wall is barely touched. That's called contrast. It's the difference between the brightest parts of the picture and the darkest. You have to add that contrast to the NPC's role. They want X, but they have to do Y. That's an internal conflict. You decide that an NPC is a guard who wants nothing more than to go home to his kids at the end of the day. and now suddenly he becomes a real person. Or the queen who wants to do the best she can under admittedly difficult circumstances. That feels like a person. Or the dragon who wants to subjugate the world with its fiery breath, as long as it doesn't endanger him personally. That's like a proper persona. All of these examples are full of contrast. You can also give a character contrast by separating them from their surroundings. In the middle of the chaos of the city, protesters run for their lives, and meteors rain from the sky. Celia Powell stands calm and steadfast. "We charge the palace," she shouts, undeterred. Holy shit, she's amazing. Why? The contrast between the chaotic surroundings and her calm demeanor renders her as a hero. And the inverse is true. Everyone draws deep breaths. The soldiers are prepared for the battle to come. They know death is on the line, but they are ready. And then Jim Weisel screams, "Oh God, we're doomed!" and runs off. Okay, Mr. Weasel.
Weisel.
His contrast to his surroundings renders him clearly. He's a coward. And if your player's success relies on him standing at his post, they need to go get him. Or they'll just laugh at him. That's perfectly fine. But the thing with renders like these is they only really work as snapshots. I mean, there's a reason why flash photography works. It creates good snapshots of people without any extra lighting faff. It provides an excellent contrast in a single moment. Basically, the spotlight is perfect for NPC introductions. And if an NPC gets to live for one scene, then it's perfect. It's a picture worth 1,000 words. But what if, after the players charge the palace with Celia Powell, they meet her over coffee? Well, she can't very well be stoic and brave in the face of tea time. So we have to fill in the details. Sometimes you just need to illuminate a character's surroundings. I think of the fill light as the light that illuminates the NPC's current situation, what they're up to at this given moment, who they are right now. Usually, this is their job, or their quest, or their service to a faction or a liege. Celia Powell, that calm woman in the chaos, she is the first Chancellor of Parliament, an elected position in the government, and she is in direct opposition to the Emperor's recent autocratic overreach. If the key light told us about the drama, the fill explains the circumstances. It's the lore. Most of the time, a fill light, a job or a quest or whatever, is enough to tell the story we're telling with a character. You know, this guard NPC is a guard. What more do you need? Yeah, the key light from earlier about going home to his kids is strong and clarifying, but if he's not in conflict with the players, then we'll likely never get that detail, and we won't need it. He'll only be lit by the fill, because unless a dramatic question unfurls, odds are most NPCs will always just be lit by the fill. And it's not terrible. Without the key, you can still see what's going on. It's just not as dramatic or as high contrast, but it's perfectly serviceable. But it's stronger once the fill and the key are both on. For our example with Celia Powell, this might be us getting to have a scene where the players speak to her before the sky comes crashing down, as she explains her situation. The Emperor vetoes bills passed by Parliament, and she's not going to take it anymore. It's her job to represent the people of Blackguard, so she's going to. The fill light helps us get it, helps us understand her as a person, her motives, her wants, and desires, her beliefs. But how is Celia Powell going to act on those beliefs? Well, that's where we bring in the edge light. This light is used to frame the detailed features of a subject, bring out their edges, shining a light on who they really are. For NPCs, think about what kind of problems they face and how they solve those problems. Celia Powell discovered the Emperor was abusing the law. He went against the will of the Atroxian people, so she was forced to act outside the law. She took to the streets and started a protest, used her voice and charm to rile people up and demand the Emperor's abdication. Damn the consequences. The Emperor must go. That's her edge. She is non-directly threatening the Emperor. I have the people on my side, and if you persist, I am going to incite a revolution. That is how far she will go. The Emperor had his own edge. He had the wizards attack the protesters. He's a violent oppressor and will do anything to hold on to his power. When his spellcasters took to the sky to use their magic, a shot was fired at one of them. So when the Evoker Supreme was threatened, he revealed his edge. He'll cast Meteor Swarm on protesters. Edges are how characters come into conflict. They're how they solve problems, and usually what makes them interesting, what makes them active. Without an edge, NPCs just sort of wait around for the players to do stuff, whereas NPCs that have an edge have not just an opinion, but a way they intend on acting on it. If your NPCs feel like they're inactive observers and only act when acted upon, consider giving a few of them an edge. Finally, we can add a little bit of backstory, and yes, that really is last on the list, because it's not the most important part. The important parts are the active ones. They are the building blocks of a person that exists now. Who they were is less important than who they are in your session tonight. Anyway, let's add one practical feature from a character's past. In filmmaking, these lights that are visible in the frame are called practicals. And that's how I want you to think of backstories. Not as passive things, not "my mom loved me and my dad had a drinking problem." Something practically actionable. Something that defines them. Celia Powell's grandfather was killed by the last emperor for rebelling. She carries that with her. The emperor has spent his whole life being raised by his father, thinking he'll be usurped by a foreign enemy. So his fear explodes when that enemy appears within his own city. He's petrified. A practical element informs us in our current story. It's something we can all hang our hat on and understand a character a little bit better. Think of it like this. If your NPC were to, at any point, lore dump their backstory onto a player, you would want that scene to feel like clarity. The player should understand the NPC afterwards, not have more questions. And here's the beauty about practicals. You can always just add more, even in the middle of a session. You can just add new backstories for characters as they go along. The reason Celia Powell won't try to compromise with anyone is because the last time she compromised, it was with the Royalist Party, and they rewarded her by arresting her. Now, she trusts only herself. Practicals are like wounds that characters take to their psyche, basically permanent. If you're listening to me talk about all these details to add to NPCs and you're thinking, well, that's easy for you to say, you do this stuff for a living, then fair. But I don't think it's hard to start doing this stuff, as long as you're willing to suck for the first couple of times you do it. But you get better as you go. And if you want help getting started, we just need some references, and my political plotline here isn't inspiring, then let me introduce you to today's sponsor, the Game Master's Compendium of Explosive Creation, a big book of big tables. There's 50 different archetypes in here, each with a table to determine their drives, arcs, rivals, allies, themes, and even plot hooks. Seriously, sitting down with this book in hand and the lighting tips in mind, you will be able to spin up a real, actual person in a few minutes. It is available as print on demand or digitally on DriveThruRPG. Affiliate links in the description and the pinned comment. What's powerful about thinking of NPCs like this is you can light them in any order. Not just from spotlight to fill to edge to features, but in any order you like or fits the unfolding narrative at your table. There's an NPC in my current game that kind of illustrates this perfectly. The party met this banker-looking character named Callum Rose in Roachport. There, they learned he worked for a private corporation called Fullburn Consulting, a company that does private espionage. One player at the table, CC the Rogue, has evidence that suggests that Fullburn Consulting was responsible for the assassination of her brother, something Callum claims he knows nothing about. That's an interesting fill light. Later, he hired the party to go explore a ruin in the woods called Gaxic Point, and when they accepted, he said he'd join them on this quest. But on the quest, it turned out he was a capable marksman, plenty able to dodge attacks effectively, and seems to be especially fast with his firearm. They learned he served in the Army's Ranger regiments. He's dangerously capable in combat, and there's our edge. When Alton the Wizard woke Callum up from his watch by telepathically speaking in his mind, Callum experienced some serious shell shock, because he associates telepathy with the time his unit died in the Frostmoor fighting mind flayers. He lost his entire unit. That's a background practical, a tangible event in his backstory that we can rest our eyes on. This unfurled over the course of many sessions. It wasn't all dumped on them at once. It was rendered over time. But here's the thing, even after that mission, learning all of that, they didn't know who he is, because they've never seen the key light on him. He's probably a private spy. He probably doesn't know about the assassination of Cece's brother, and he probably will help the players in a fight like he did at Gaxic Point. But we don't know. Push hasn't turned to shove, and we haven't seen him in a high contrast situation yet. So the anticipation of seeing the key light being switched on is always present in every scene they do with him. There's this hanging dramatic question over every moment. When the cards are down, what will Callum Rose do? And not knowing feels engaging now. It's not like being in the dark either. We have a clear fill, edge, and practical. This kind of lack of knowledge is different because as the DM, I've turned on every other light in the scene. The players know I'm deliberately keeping the key light off for now until the right moment. That creates tension. You can do this by turning on every light except one, and that creates this fruitful void where we want to know more. The presence of other lights makes the lack of that one light source clear to the players. Like, what if we did everything except the fill? We know how someone will act under crisis. We know who they are and why they are the way they are, but we don't know what they're doing at a given moment. Why not? What are they up to? Or every other light except the edge. And you make a character feel safe to a degree that can create a little bit of tension. You open up for a question like, is that really all that's going on with this NPC? To which you can remove the tension by saying, yes, they are safe. Or you shrug and let your players wonder. And that's not the only trick with this. You can light a character before they show up. You pre-light them. This is especially powerful if you want to introduce an important or politically powerful NPC and you want them to land into a scene already fully formed. Let's say you've got a scene coming up where the Raven Queen is supposed to arrive and you want her to show up fully rendered. Well, then you spend time rendering the Raven Queen before she shows up. You have other NPCs talk about the Raven Queen. Light her for the players as the NPCs talk her up before she shows up. The Raven Queen usurped the divinity over the afterlife from the Pale Knight through bloodshed and conquest. Okay, slay. The Raven Queen controls her domain, the Shadowfell, from her tower in the Fortress of Memories in Evergloom. Okay, Queen. The Raven Queen is a lonely god bereft of the joy given to the living forevermore, such as her price for divinity. Okay, bummer. By the time she finally shows up, you've already lit a whole persona, and the players will have created in their head and mapped their ideas about her onto her. For bonus points, you introduce her with a high contrast key light and capture that moment, and suddenly everything will slide together and she'll appear fully formed to your player's eye. And you're not stuck here either. You can always relight the character when a new scene with them starts. Hell, once a scene is started, you've still got a little bit of, let's call it post-processing. You can tweak the colors, the saturation, the contrast, the shadows. The beauty of rendering scenes is that it's an active process. Since RPGs happen in your head, they're being created by every sentence spoken at the table. You're not hidebound by something you said once. You can shift and change and adjust and massage your renders and light characters as they're played, hopefully getting closer and closer to yours and your player's vision with each render pass. And I'll also say rendering and lighting characters like this is a whole process. It's not quick. It takes time and effort to render a character. And speaking as someone whose players have an incomplete spreadsheet to keep track of NPCs, which has 97 entries on it, I'll tell you this. I don't do this for every character. I do this for like a handful of characters per adventure. 90% of my characters are much simpler because you don't have to do much to create a memorable NPC. You really don't. There is a reason we, D&D nerds, know about Boblin the Goblin, and we all cried when Fartbuckle died. An NPC can just be a funny name, a silly accent, or in the case of one of my players' favorite NPCs, some old guy. I just pull down my glasses and try my best to sound like an old man. And I swear to God, they all go, "Aww,
he's old!"
And then I had this old man trust the players implicitly, shower them with praise, and every night I roll a D100 to see if he died in his sleep.
Boo!
And I'm telling you, they watch me roll those dice behind the screen with bated breath. I don't tell them the result. And I'll roll even if I've already gotten 100, the heart attack result. Because every time they go back to Roachport, where old Whitelock lives, they go visit him to see if he's doing okay or not. They love him. At first, he was just old man, an old man voice. And over time, they kept coming back to him, so I added a little light here, a little light there, and he slowly gets more and more illuminated as the characters come back to him, which really is just going to make his inevitable heart attack that much more tragic. Loads of films do this too. They'll introduce a strong character with a strong key light, and then just leave him like that until they need to add some more depth. I was watching The Patriot with AB the other day. Look, it's a historically inaccurate, cheesy movie mess from the year 2000, but oh my god, are the feelings real? Don't judge me. And it's full of simple side characters that the movie feels no need to develop further. And listen, it works a treat. There's a guy who's enjoying this guerrilla fighting thing a little too much. There's a battle-beaten general who just wants to win the war. There's the Reverend who joins the guerrillas and all of his lines are reverendy. There's General Cornwallis, a walking stereotype of a British aristocratic gentleman commander, and Jason Isaacs plays Muggle Lucius Malfoy in the 1700s. There's this one French guy who's really French and really wants to kill the Brits in a French way. And it's a good ways into the film where we learn that his beef isn't just standard Anglo-French foreign relations, it's something deeper.
British men of war gave no such quarter when it fired on a ship carrying my wife and daughters. I watched from 200 yards off as they were burnt alive.
Those characters are all memorable because of a much simpler trick. They're bit parts. They're just what it says on the tin. That way we can keep all these characters in our head. And then for morally complex or emotionally complex characters, we have the father-son duo of Benjamin and Gabriel Martin. They are fully lit and rendered, and the rest just lit with a single light. It's enough for most characters anyway. Don't go overboard. Just light what you need. Let the rest be sharp and memorable by leaning into stereotypes. They are useful. You don't need to know anything more about General Cornwallis than him being a British gentleman general. It does the job for us perfectly fine. And this becomes especially powerful the more you revisit a character too, in the same campaign or across multiple campaigns, which almost all of my favorite NPCs have done now. A character not unlike General Cornwallis, Lord Trevor Rosenthal, was at first an admiral that was a largely antagonistic force to the player characters, but they never confronted him. So in a different campaign, he was more of an ally, a useful ally. He had a navy. Later, players met him as the president of Atroxia, and now he was getting depth, just by virtue of the fact that him having been an admiral was now his backstory. So he'd added a layer of depth, a new light, and later on players met him as the senile former president. And at that point, he mostly wanted to talk about cowboy fiction books he loved growing up. Same character, different light. Now, that's a lot of advice on how to create a fully detailed 3D render of an NPC, which is fantastic fun, and they can capture and enrapture your players, but here's the thing. The players are the heroes of your story, not your NPCs. So you've got to be careful here that you're not overstepping as the DM. Your most important characters at the table should be your players' characters. When you start creating these detailed NPCs, you're going to have to promise yourself that their job is to act as a mirror to the players. Their job is to frame up characters and their conflict. Celia Powell's charge on the palace was initiated by the players. Rosenthal, seen as a senile bookworm, was reflective of a player's experience of even political rivals being just people. Callum Rose exists to poke at CC's tension with Fulburn Consulting. Your PCs are the heroes of the story, and if you're wanting to create memorable NPCs, I want you to ask yourself, why? Because if you really want is to play, then you should be honest about that and go get yourself a chance to play. But if you're watching this video because you want NPCs that inspire players to roleplay, think of them as mirrors or funhouse reflections. Create NPCs that are a lot like one of the player characters but different in a few noticeable ways, and then have them ask the player characters some leading questions. Use them as little pokers to ask fun questions of the characters, or as moral quandaries that make your players question what the right thing to do is. Do we let Celia Powell storm the palace and unseat the Emperor, or do we calm her down to save the lives of the people who will undoubtedly die in her revolution? Use the NPC's edge to create an inflection point, and then get the players in on the inflection point. Put the question to them. What's the right thing to do? And then you don't answer. Let your players answer. It's their story. Give it to them. And that's where we'll pick it up next time. Thanks so much for watching this video. This channel is run by me and my girlfriend, and if you want us to support us directly, consider joining our Patreon. Patrons get access to our Discord and Adept members and get spells, monsters, magic items, and classes, and all compatible with 5th edition. If you're feeling especially generous, you might like the video, comment, share, or subscribe, and hit the bell to be notified when we release new videos. Until next time, keep studying the mystic arts.